Yo guys, Superior David here, and Fractured and Alterac Valley is about to release, or maybe it has already released depending on like when you're watching this video, which it means it's time for me to give you decks that you can play day one of the expansion. So I have for you today 10 superior decks that you can play day one of Fractured and Alterac Valley. As always, some of these will be more competitive while others are more memey, and I even have some that lean more on like the older cards for those budget-minded players out there. So hopefully I got something for everyone here. That was the goal, and if all this is sounding good to you guys, make sure to hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and also subscribe if you aren't already, just so you can like keep up with all my superior deck guides to come this expansion. And now I guess with that out of the way, let's get into these decks. As is tradition on this channel, we will be starting things off with my favorite class, Druid. And while Druid is, it's getting some interesting cards this expansion, I think they're best used bolstering existing archetypes. So I have for you today a Beast Aggro Druid. This list is similar to the current Aggro Druid builds, but we replaced the Taunt Synergy stuff with the new Beast Synergy cards that Druid is receiving. And I think this gives the archetype less early game explosiveness, but I believe it more than makes up for it with like potential mid game bursts, since both of like the Frost Wolf cards we are running here summon beasts with stealth. So you can like hold back those attacks now and wait until you have like the new Heart of the Wild or like Claw Flurry Adept, or of course a good old Arbor up to just burst your opponent down that way. And beyond that, we are also getting a decent beast payoff card with the Frost Saber Matriarch, which allows you to fairly easily cheat stats onto the board and apply just a lot more pressure in the mid game, in my opinion. As for other new cards, we've got the new Druid Legendary Wing Commander Mulveric, which I think will be good if there are board-based decks in the meta, but if not, he might struggle a bit, so just a little heads up there. Then finally we've got the new Iron Deep Trog that many think is going to be a monster in aggro decks, and I'm inclined to agree with that. It's essentially a one drop that can create its own board, and it could just become like an absolute monster as well if you can buff it, which this deck can do. So I think it will be good in this deck. And I know some people are still like clinging on to their Razormane Battle Guards, but I don't think you have the critical mass of taunts to make them good anymore if you're running like a beast package. So that's why I did not include them here, and I'm ready to potentially be wrong. I just wanted to explain my reasoning. Now, keeping with the theme of beasts over here, next up we have Hunter, and unfortunately I think the best Hunter deck will be some form of Face Hunter, as it has been pretty much the whole year, but that's not going to stop me from talking about this sweet Death Rattle Beast Hunter that I brewed for you guys today. And what has me really excited for this archetype is the new Revive Pet. I saw this card when it was revealed and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely insane, because it's a 3 mana targeted resurrect effect that's really efficient for what it's doing, and this card would be like broken in any other class, but because it's a Hunter, it'll probably just be okay. And like, even though this can only resurrect beasts, Hunter is getting some like really interesting Death Rattle synergy beasts with the new Stormpike Battle Ram that allows you to get down the also new Mountain Bear just a bit faster. This Mountain Bear feels like the Hunter equivalent of Voidlord, so I wouldn't sleep on this guy here. And since we're also running like the Jewel of Nazah, since we are like a Death Rattle deck, we also have just like other Death Rattle cards. I want to point to the new one, and that is the Korak the Blood Rager. This is a card that I'm very hyped about because it seems like just like a total pain in the butt to remove, and I think that will just allow this Hunter deck to just sort of ink in that little damage over time, and especially with that hero power, just apply like a lot of pressure that way. And you will definitely be seeing more of the Korak later in this video. And I guess now finally for the last new card we've got, we have the Beast Stalker Tavish, because I think the upgraded secrets are just freaking powerful, and like the hero power is good enough despite like potential anti-synergy with Revive Pet. Now moving right along to Shaman, I have for you a super cool archetype that actually seemed like really good in the Theorycraft streams, and now I'm like very excited to play it, and that is Freeze Shaman, if you couldn't tell by my super cringy pun there. And now with this deck, you essentially want to play a bunch of the new Frost spells Shaman is receiving, which are all pretty good on their own. Anyways, this allows you to like make a thick board with the new Barren Glacier. That's the really like big payoff for like the freeze synergy stuff. And I was like sort of mixed on this card at first until I realized that you could play the Cheaty Snowballed the following turn, and it basically gives your like Baron Glacier board Bloodlust, since those 3/4 elementals freeze enemies. You send them all face, they'll freeze your opponent's face multiple times, and yes, Cheaty Snowballed's ability will proc even if you freeze an already frozen target, just like a little FYI there. So that seems really good. And I'm also like pretty excited for the Snowfall Guardian, which is basically like a Frost Nova with a body on it, and I'm ready to just like totally scam games against opponents who like carelessly board lock themselves. And like, if all this isn't enough, we've also got the Brucana, the Elements, just for like a little bit more value. And like, honestly, the deck might not even need the Brucan, but he does seem like a lot of fun. And I feel like overall, Free Shaman, it was a meme in the past, but I think it's getting the support to become an actual competitive deck, and I'm really excited to play it day one, as I said before. Now moving on to Paladin, this one should frankly be no surprise to people who watch the stream, which you totally should check out the stream, by the way, if you haven't already, because you would know that I like my big decks, and I cannot lie, fly. So next up, we'll be talking about some big Paladin. Now, big archetypes are only as good as like the means they have to cheat out big old minions, which is why like the new Cavalry Horn is reviving interest in the big Paladin archetype. And personally, I'm a little mixed on it because it feels a bit slow to me, but I'm very excited for the new big minions we're running, with my favorite being the new Brasswing, just due to its like really interesting honorable kill effect, which could provide like some stability. And I feel like Baron Geddon's just sort of crying somewhere in a corner because this dude seems a lot better than him. But anyways, we also have the Templar Captain, who's like no slouch himself in like that anti-aggro defensive department because he's got rush, so he can impact the board immediately, and then he summons Taunt, so that's really nice too. Anyways, I feel like the rest of the list is mostly just like survival and defensive support spells to stay alive, and we are getting a couple new ones, with the first being the Vitality Surge, which gives us some nice healing, but it could also like help support that Cavalry Horn I mentioned earlier by getting those big old minions into our hands. So that seems very nice there. Then we've got the Protect the Innocent, which honestly I'm not as excited about, but it seems like an okay defensive tool in this deck where we like don't want to be running like any minions besides our big minions. Finally, we've got the Lightforge Carriel, because I think her immovable object weapon is busted and will like really help this deck against like aggro decks, as well as like some of the OTK decks that try to like linger around in the meta. So I think overall, like Lightforge Carriel is gonna be very good. It's gonna see play in lots of Paladin decks. As for the viability of this deck, I think that remains to be seen, but I think it will definitely be a very fun one. Now, keeping with our theme of big decks here, next up we'll be moving on to Mage, where I will be talking about some Big Spell Mage. Now, Big Spell Mage has been receiving support all year in terms of like big spell payoff cards, but the actual big spell pool has been lacking, and there's been like no reason to play these cards. But that is changing in Alterac Valley, where Mage is receiving like some awesome big spells like the Iceblood Tower, Mass Polymorph, and my favorite of them all, Rune of the Archmage, which I believe is just going to be like better puzzle box. Feels very powerful to me. And as you can see with like the big spells, I tried to include a variety just so we can like make use of the Magister Dawngrasp, which the community generally thinks isn't good, but I'm remaining hopeful here. Now, the issue you tend to run into when theory crafting these decks is like including the right amount of anti-aggro or early game cards versus like your greedy big spell cards, because if you don't have enough of those anti-aggro cards, you're not going to make it to the late game, so you can like abuse those big spells. So as you can see, I erred on the side of including like too many anti-aggro cards. You see like a lot of familiar faces here, as well as the new Stormpike Marshal, which seems like the new go-to like neutral anti-aggro card. And then we just have like a couple of the new like early game mage minions, Shivering Sorceress for some mana cheating, and Amplified Snow Flurry for like early game board control. And like both of these just seem like amazing mage minions that will find their ways into like pretty much most mage lists outside of like Spell Mage. Now, overall, do I think Big Spell Mage will get there this expansion? I'm not too sure about that. There's definitely like a lot of big spell support at the moment, but it feels like those support cards don't necessarily synergize well with each other. Like the new Mage Legendary, I didn't really talk about her. I feel like she creates some like anti-synergy moments. So I think this list will require like some more tinkering once there's like an established meta and we like know exactly what cards we need to include and which ones we can sort of cut back on. So definitely stay tuned to the development of Big Spell Mage over the course of the expansion. Now, moving right along to Rogue, I have for you today a super fun Death Rattle Burgle Rogue that I think is actually going to be like very good. Basically, we use Sketchy Information, Counterfeit Blade, and the new Forsaken Lieutenant to correct the Blood Ranger, which I talked about earlier in the video, and then also Infiltrator Lillian's Death Rattle effect just a ton of times to overwhelm opponents. And to back this up, we also run like a Burgle package that like sort of abuses Maestra of the Masquerade to cheat out Wildpaw Null super fast, since you start the game as like a different class. So like all the rogue cards you get in the mulligan in your starting hand will permanently discount Wildpaw Null, and I think that's really good. And it seems to be like how most of the people are like taking the rogue decks at the moment, just in their theory crafting. And then like in addition to the more familiar Burgle synergy cards we also run the new Reconnaissance, which also has like the benefit of synergizing with our Death Rattle payoff cards. So it just it double dips in this deck, so I feel like it's gonna be pretty good here. And then finally, we round out the list with a couple more Burgle payoff cards, like the Double Agent, which can apply like a lot of pressure if you could proc its effect on curve, which I think will be like pretty easy on the coin. And then we also run the new Contraband Stash, which I was skeptical of, but Funky Monkey said it was good on Twitter, so I was like, screw it, we'll throw it in the list. And to address the elephant in the room, yes, I purposely did not include the Scabs Hero card. My hot take here is that I don't think it's going to be very good, and I think that the community's overrating it. So, take that as you will. I'm just going to, drop my mic, walk away, and move right along to this next deck over here. So following up that hot take, we have ourselves an even hotter deck here, a very spicy one indeed, because we'll be talking about Warlock, and, no, we're not going to be doing any boring quest Warlock stuff here. We'll be talking about an archetype that wasn't even like on my radar until like the Theorycraft stream, but it's amazing, and that is the Humongous Owl OTK Warlock, which, seems like more of a fun deck, but I can see a world where it's actually really good. Now, basically, you OTK your opponent by killing off the new Humongous Owl just at some point in the game. Then you play Wicked Shipment after trading it a couple times, so you can summon a board full of imps and use the new Tamsin's Phylactery to give those Imps, Humongous Owl's Death Rattle, which you then kill off with like a School Spirits to OTK your opponent. And like this is like the OTK at like its most basic, and you can like really speed things up to like broken levels with like by cheating mana with the Rune Mithril Rod, of course, to just potentially kill the owl off and like pull off this OTK in the same turn. And in addition to this, it gets even better. You can use good old Tamsin Roam to get a second copy of Tamsin's Phylactery, which, you know, I love saying that card's name, Phylactery, and potentially just do even more damage by giving your board Owl's Death Rattle twice, which is good against like Warriors, Armor Gain, or like decks that can go wide to prevent like Owl's Death Rattle from like targeting the face, because it does just target like a random enemy. As for other new cards, the only one we run is the Dreadlich Tamsin, which feels absolutely busted to me. It's like, it's AoE, it's card draw, and it, you know, it's Armor Gain, and like it also potentially puts pressure on the board with the Imps, which like, you know, we don't even really care about that part, but it's still quite nice. It just has a lot going for it. So, you know, overall, while this deck feels more like a fun memey one to me, I can actually see the potential for it being good due to the mana cheating and just efficient card draw. And, you know, Tamsin's also very good herself, so just don't sleep on like the thick owl OTK deck over here. Now, next up, we have Demon Hunter, which, you know, if you watch these videos, you know, I usually save for last, but I'm actually really excited for this deck that I'm going to be talking about. So Illidan is moving on up in this video. But anyways, I have for you today a Token Demon Hunter. Now, similar to Big Spell Mage, Token Demon Hunter has been receiving like a ton of support seemingly like forever, but the payoffs have like never really been there. But that's changing in Alterac Valley, mainly with the new Urzel Giants that cost 1 less for each friendly minion that died this game. This card just seems so freaking busted, and I think it will be like enough to, you know, make this archetype competitive. But there's also, you know, some other good payoff cards with like the new Field of Strife, which like gives this deck burst, and then like the new the Flag Runner, which, you know, gives off some serious Darkshire Councilman vibes, and like, you know, that was like a pretty good card for its time. So I feel like this card should be good as well. And of course, how can I forget about the new Kurtr's Demon Render, whose damage dealing hero power refreshes after attacking, which, you know, allows us to like threaten like a lot of like burst damage with like our little token minions. And, you know, I was tempted to include the Felfire Deadeye in our list to just make our refreshing hero power free, but I don't think you really need this card for that deck to function, and are just better off running more token synergy cards like the new Battleswarm Vanguard, and even like the Ram Commander, because the more token minions you summon and kill in the early game, the sooner you can get down those big old giants, which I believe will just win you most of your games. Now, that's enough daydreaming of shirtless Kurtrus, because we got to move on to Warrior, which, you know, seemingly is getting more reactive cards in the expansion, but it is getting a couple spicy things that I'm very excited to mess around with. So I have for you today a Control Captain Galvangar OTK Warrior. Basically, against aggro decks, the idea is to just remove minions and gain armor, which I believe the new Frozen Buckler and Shield Shatter will be amazing for. But then in slower matchups, we win with this OTK, which you pull off by playing to the front twice, followed by Captain Galvangar that you then like duplicate with Faceless Manipulator, and then you give them both Wind Fear using Battleground Battlemaster to deal 36 damage to your opponent. And, you know, like if this isn't enough, we also run like Rokara the Valorous just for more damage with the weapon and the hero power, which, you know, this could like make it so you don't need the like to like assemble like this full like combo to kill someone. Maybe you can get away with like half the combo. But like the one thing I'm not sure about running in this list is the inclusion of the Vandar, which allows us to, you know, potentially OTK someone faster. But because we include him, that means we can't run Lord Bayrov, which has been one of the best cards in Warrior since its release. So, you know, it's definitely like a big trade-off. But my thinking is that Warrior has so much removal and armor gain now that we'll be able to just manage without Lord Bayrov, or, you know, if not, you can come back to this video later and just make fun of me for this silly decision. And finally, here we are with the last class for this video, and that is Priest, which I wanted to save for last just so I can make sure I could make Zeddy watch my whole video, because I know how much he loves Priest as a Priest main after all. But onto the deck. To be honest, I think a lot of people are going to be brewing a Death Rattle Priest, and, you know, since I already have like a couple Death Rattle decks, I want to just go into like a different direction. So I have for you a Miracle Rally Priest that I'm actually quite hyped on. This is mainly due to the new card Bless, which is essentially the new Inner Fire, and I like this card a lot because it gives Priest like an actual sort of like proactive win condition to like work towards and close out games. And Bless can like put in serious work, and if you can cast it like on like an Iron Deep Trog on turn 2, it will like absolutely just snowball most games to victory. And I believe that Iron Deep Trog will truly excel in this deck, since we run like so many buffs that it could be like a threat like at most points in the game. And in my opinion, it makes Rally just like a lot more like worth running again, because now Priest sort of has like this perfect like 1-2-3 curve off of Rally to like reload not only their hand with like, you know, Sathik and Nazmani Bloodweaver, but also now potentially the board with like Iron Deep Trog. Now, this deck is light on the new cards, but we are running one new one that is very important, and that is Gift of the Naru, which is a cheap spell, so it's good with Nazmani Bloodweaver, but it also draws you a card most of the time, and it also has synergy with Zyrella. So I think it's just like an all-star in this deck. It just does so much for so little. And again, I know this deck is light on the new cards, but I think the cards that we do add just make it so much better than it was before. And I think like Miracle Priest has the potential to be like a real monster in the new expansion, because it has like a way to really close out games, where before it was much more like, oh, I hope I random into something here. So, you know, all in all, don't sleep on this Miracle Priest deck. I think it will actually be pretty good. And with that, we have conquered the Fractured and Alterac Valley Theory Crafting Gauntlet. 10 superior decks for you guys to play day one of the expansion. Let me know down in the comments what decks you'll be playing day one. And again, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more superior Hearthstone content. And all in all, thanks so much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. In the meantime, stay superior. Hope you enjoyed day one of the expansion, and I'll see you in the next one. Later. Get that